Welcome back to Live from Paris. A look at our headlines. Emmanuel Macron defends his decision to pull French troops out of Mali, saying it is not defeat. France will redeploy neighboring West African countries, but the move marking a radical shift in strategy that some fear could create a vacuum for jihadists to fill. We'll speak to our French politics editor to find out more. The NATO chief says he fears Russia is staging a pretext to invade Ukraine. Reports of shelling in the east of the country, violating a ceasefire agreement, and coming amid conflicting reports of Russian troop numbers on Ukraine's borders. The so-called Freedom Convoy protests against coronavirus restrictions continue in Canada's capital, despite an ultimatum from Ottawa police ordering protesters to leave or face arrest. After spending roughly $1 billion a year and after the death of dozens of French soldiers, President Emmanuel Macron announced that French forces will leave Mali. This following a breakdown in relations with the country's ruling junta. France had initially deployed troops against jihadists in Mali back in 2013, but the insurgency was never fully quelled. The forces will be redeployed across Africa's Sahel region. Here's Macron speaking earlier.
I refuse that word of failure for several reasons. First of all, what would have happened in 2013 if France had not intervened? I think certainly you would have seen the Malian state would have crumbled. That was what was about to happen. Perhaps at best it would have been a caliphate, and at worst it would have been a terrorist state. And in particular, Al-Qaeda in the region had the capacity to travel down as far south as Bamako, and that was the situation at the time.
Well, for more, let's speak to our French politics editor, Mark Perlman, in Brussels. Mark, tell us, what are the ramifications of France's withdrawal from Mali?
Well, clearly, those are big ramifications for Mali because France will leave. The 3 remaining military bases within the next 6 months will be abandoned by the French. And the immediate effect that was already mentioned by the French president is that there's less military cooperation against jihadist groups. So for Mali, clearly, the French are sending the message that, yes, we're leaving because you don't want us. You want to deal with Russian paramilitaries. You want to protect the junta rather than fight terrorism. So, well, you'll be on your own, essentially. So that's essentially the message that was agreed upon with other European partners that had gingerly accepted to participate to this fight against terrorism, and with other African states, especially Niger, neighboring Niger, which becomes, in effect, the center of the new format of the French military presence, as well as countries on the West African coast, Ivory Coast, Ghana, Togo, and Benin, because French troops will be partially redeployed there to have a more nimble, more agile military presence, because the French president says, we're leaving Mali, they don't want us, so we're leaving, but we're certainly not leaving the Sahel, and we're calling upon other partners, including the U.S., including Canada, to stay involved, because the fight against terrorism is far from over.
Yeah, and this comes less than 2 months ahead of a presidential election here in France. Emmanuel Macron keen for Mali not to turn into his own personal Afghanistan.
Absolutely. The shadow of Afghanistan is there. French officials will obviously tell journalists and others that there's absolutely no parallel. But indeed, there is this concern, first of all, that years of military presence, years of human and economic spending were there with little results. But also, there is this fear that this could become a hot political issue. And the opposition has already seized on this, saying, you know, why are we staying? Our soldiers are dying. The junta doesn't want us anymore. They don't trust us anymore. They go with Russian paramilitaries. So Emmanuel Macron really realized that he had to cut his losses and essentially exit Mali as soon as possible to clear the deck, if I may use the expression, for the presidential campaign, where he still hasn't declared himself, but is probably going to do so in the very near future.
All right, Mark, thank you very much. Mark Perlman reporting from Brussels. Now, also speaking earlier today alongside the French president was the Senegal president, Macky Sall. Listen to what he had to say.
The fight against terrorism is a major challenge for Africa. We do not want the continent to become the soft underbelly of international terrorism. This is why we wish to continue the solidarity efforts that are underway and have been for some time, and that we've always welcomed.
Well, let's speak to our correspondent in Bamako, Anne-Fleur Lespio. Hello, Anne-Fleur. Tell us, first of all, has there been any reaction to Emmanuel Macron's announcement?
Yes, so in Bamako, this announcement was not a surprise for the Malians, and the Malian army has just given a press conference in reaction to the announcements of Emmanuel Macron. According to Colonel Dembélé here in Bamako, the presence of foreign armies will not be able to do better than the Malian armed forces. During his address, the soldier said, and I quote, "This is our country. Are they, Barkhane and the other military partners, going to fight like us?" The answer is no. As you know, these last few months have been marked by anti-French demonstrations throughout Mali, with the population denouncing France's foreign policy in West Africa, a population that has questioned the validity of Operation Barkhane, which, after 9 years of intervention in Mali, has not succeeded in providing an answer to the security crisis. The majority of the Malians here welcome the withdrawal of France in favor of new partners such as Russia and others. But the departure of Barkhane is still worrying a section of the population, including some opposition politicians. For them, Mali now needs, and I quote, all its sons, all its friends, and all its partners to meet the security challenge. Mali does not need to isolate itself. They recall in that terms of the fight against terrorism, Mali is a pivotal country in the heart of the Sahel.
And Anne-Fleur, let's pick up that last point. How will Mali fight jihadists now? What resources does it have?
In recent weeks, the transitional authorities have focused their attention on the country's security by announcing the increase of the strength of the FAMA, the Malian Armed Forces, which they claim has allowed security to return to certain localities in the center of the country, which is the epicenter of the conflict in Mali. But as we have seen with the presence of Barkhane and other European partners or the G5 Sahel, the military response will not be enough to meet the security challenge in Mali and more broadly in the Sahel. So what will be the impact on military and humanitarian partners who continue to work on the field, such as the UN peacekeeping mission, whose positions are regularly targeted by attacks? What will be the state's response to the security challenge? Will the transitional authorities officially begin negotiations with the jihadist groups that now control 2/3 of the Mali's territory? As you would have guessed, Mali is entering a period of uncertainty in which many questions remain unanswered for the moment.
All right. Thank you very much, Anne-Fleur Lepesquier reporting from Bamako. Well, time now we can speak to Niagalé Bagayoko, head of the African Security Sector Network. Thank you for being very patient as we get to our interview. First question, we felt like it was coming to this, but was it really inevitable, and was the timing correct for Emmanuel Macron to withdraw French forces from Mali?
I think, yes, it was absolutely inevitable, because even if until last week we still have received some press communique from the military major staff in Paris saying that the cooperation on the ground is very successful with the FAMA, the Malian Armed Forces, it was absolutely impossible to continue to distinguish the political approach to the crisis from the military one. And we saw that the diplomatic relations with Malian authorities have been deteriorating for years, not only since the junta had made a new coup in last May, but also under President Ibeka, who was also in deep disagreement with French authority as regards both the implementation of the peace agreement in the north, which is dissociated from the question of fighting jihadism, and also regarding the negotiation questions, which were really at the core of the beginning of very big tensions.
Well, in that sense, you think maybe France should have withdrawn its troops sooner?
In my view, they should have. Of course, it's always very difficult to withdraw such a massive deployment, but it's clear that first we have seen a growing discontentment within the population at large, and also those tensions which were really becoming not to be able to be overcome over the months. It became absolutely clear that there were such gaps between French and Malians that the military deployment was beginning to be meaningless.
Yeah, one of those gaps, obviously, that Paris didn't want to negotiate with jihadists. Bamako did. Which strategy is correct?
That's very difficult to say, because it all depends on the perspective of each actor. And I think, in fact, the issue at stake is really a difference of perspective on the solutions to the crisis. First, for instance, elections are not seen as a solution to overcome what is now seen as a major problem in the country, which is security. So it is the first different perspective. Second, you also do have, of course, this question of enlarging partnerships and in which Mali has been engaging in. We saw that with Russia, but I'm not sure that French are very happy to see that there are also talks with Turkey or with Iran. So it is also something very a matter of tension between the two countries. But as regards this question of negotiation, it is clear that having a clear political approach to this crisis is what has been missing in the French vision. We have seen a massive deployment from a military prospect, but as regard exactly the kind of political solution which was promoted by France, it was still stayed very unclear.
We're running out of time, so real quickly, we only have a few seconds left. Is Mali going to become a failed state and a terrorist safe haven?
That's not sure. I think there are different parameters, and the most important will be what about the very violent fighting between jihadi groups affiliated to Al-Qaeda and those affiliated to Islamic States. It will be absolutely crucial in the forthcoming weeks.
Oh, I'm sorry we've run out of time, but thank you very much for your time, your analysis. Niagalé Bagayoko from the African Security Network.